The lives of holy people, saints, are a feature of many traditions. Stories told and retold, written down, elaborated in different versions, used to entertain and educate children hanging around the kitchen. They have been one powerful way of transmitting belief and values, feeding the imagination, fueling commitment, shaping the way the world, humanity, God are seen, understood. The story of the saints Barlaam and Josaphat may be among the most popular stories of holy lives. It circulated widely in Europe in the Middle Ages. It was included in Western Europe's most successful collection of such tales, the 13th century Golden Legend of the Archbishop of Genoa in Italy, Jacobus de Voragine. But it appeared earlier in Europe, in Latin, and also later in many other forms. It was a story with a remarkable career, told broadly, impacting lives, often profoundly. This was a story of Christian saints. It connected European hearers of the tale with a distant reality, the Christians of faraway India. Through this story of the intentionally sheltered Indian prince, Josaphat, who encountered the monk Barlaam, and through him was converted to Christian faith, leading others to this path, and eventually giving up his wealth and his kingdom, and following a calling of ascetic devotion. The Italian Jacobus and others attributed the tale as they knew it to an origin in Syria or Palestine, that is, to John of Damascus, a well-known bridge between Christian theologies of the East and West. But as historians in the 19th century convincingly demonstrated, John could not have been the source. Instead, it seems, the version thought to begin with John instead came from another region, from Mount Athos, a vital center of Eastern Orthodox monastic life. Historical detective work has shown that this earlier Greek version of the tale was produced by a Georgian monk writing in Mount Athos in the 11th century, who took it from a version in the Georgian language of the Caucasus, a version traced back to the 9th century. But oddly, that version was not the original. It had come into Georgia from an earlier Arabic version, a version told as a story not of Christians, but of Muslims following an ascetic path. This version seems to have appeared first in the 8th century, and it spawned many other Islamic versions of these Muslim saints. The Islamic form itself was a reworking of a tale told by Manichaeans, from a religious tradition strong at that time in Persia, Central Asia, and on further to the east. They had borrowed the story from an older 3rd or 4th century version in Middle Persian, from a Central Asian region known as Sogdiana, a version itself of a still older tale from India, the earliest form we know. And that version was a Buddhist story, the story of the Buddha, or rather the one to become a Buddha, the Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the Bodhisattva. The story's broad adventure, from its first Buddhist form, shows the Bodhisattva becoming the Persian and Manichaean Bodhisaf, the Islamic Yudasaf, the Georgian Christian Yodasaf, the Greek Christian Joasaph, and the Latin Christian Josaphat. And there were further versions. A 13th century Hebrew translation from the Arabic, made first in Barcelona. Many European vernacular versions. And from the Greek, translations into Slavonic languages and into Russian, into Arabic for Arabic-speaking Christians, and into a Ge'ez version by Christians in Ethiopia. What do we take away from this strange path of connections across regions, languages, and religious traditions? Some historians and theologians, in particular the scholar of comparative religion Wilfred Cantwell Smith, have pointed to Barlaam and Josaphat, the interconnectedness of traditions evident in the sharing of this story across what we imagine to be the boundaries between religions, as evidence that when we think of our tradition as being entirely and purely apart and separate, we are thinking in error. It's not the case that Barlaam and Josaphat were not really Christian saints. They were, because Christians engaged in profound ways with their lives, their stories, in a Christian context. But that context had been shaped by experiences lived in other religious traditions. The traditions were neighbors, and had long been so. There was sharing, conscious and unconscious. The sharing through Barlaam and Josaphat continued as Smith recounted how a parable within the story, the parable of a man poised between living and ultimate destruction, with time running out, distracted from what is most important by a deceptive sweetness of momentary pleasure. How this parable crystallized a moment of conversion for the aristocratic and worldly Russian writer Lev Tolstoy, helping him to see that following a radical path of discipleship was a call for a here and now commitment to the poor, and how Tolstoy's writing about this conversion caught the eye in a sensitive moment of an ambitious, Western-oriented Indian when he was studying in London. How it led to his own conversion to a different path, one of re-engagement with Indian spirituality, and a commitment to liberation for oppressed people through radical non-violence, and how this Indian spiritual and political path caught the eye of the American pastors, teachers, theologians, Howard Thurman, and Martin Luther King, Jr. The global relation, in some sense through the tale of holy persons, originating in India and being shared, traveling far and wide, made connections, revealed connections, and spurred deep and enduring transformations.